session, and welcome to those who've just joined a few minutes ago. So this is Regenerate Devon, building a socially and ecologically resilient economy together. Over 560 people have now registered for this, which is just mind-boggling. We're still trying to come to terms with that, really. And a wonderful range of different types of people. Social enterprises, obviously, we're social enterprises, but we've got interested citizens who are always good people to have, charity and voluntary sector, commercial businesses, academics, students, you name it, they're here somewhere. All people who really care about building back better, which is our focus. We really appreciate your participation. Regenerate Devon needs everyone to do this. No one person is going to be able to. And we are the three social enterprise networks. Plymouth Social Enterprise Network from Plymouth, as the name suggests, Essence of Exeter, and Local Spark from Torbay. So this afternoon's session is Company Governance Fit for the Future. And I'm now going to hand over to the host, Andrew Shadrake. Thank you for doing this, Andrew. Over to you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I should introduce myself in about 30 seconds. I'm part of a group called Action on Climate, which is working with Cambridge District Council to try and achieve their unambitious target of net zero by 2025. I'm also someone who makes a living from helping people to start social enterprises, getting their legal structures right and their finances as well. And I'm an associate of Local Spark, one of the organisers of today. It's probably worth starting by just talking about how this afternoon session fits into the whole of the day and the whole of the summit, really, because not everyone will have been here for all the sessions. So yesterday, we looked about creating a vision of a socially and ecologically resilient Devon. Today, we're looking at how we can realise that vision. And there are really a number of sessions about how we can give people agency, more decision-making in different aspects. This morning, we talked, for example, about creating meaningful jobs, about climate stewardship, how businesses in particular can help with climate stewardship. And this session, obviously, is forming governance. So it's all about giving people more agency. And in each of the sessions, we start with short presentations from people doing great things. And then we have a Q&A session. So can I say now that there is a chat box. Please do put any questions into the chat box as things go along. And I think Gareth, if he's here, will be helping me. We'll pull out those questions afterwards to put to the panel after they've done their sessions. After we've had a Q&A, we'll have a breakout into a number of different rooms so people can discuss different aspects of what we've been talking about. And then we'll have a final plenary. So this section is about business governance, and it's worth perhaps about a couple of minutes just saying why this is so important and why things are changing. We're probably all aware that companies historically have been very hierarchical. They still are. Controlled by a small group of directors and very senior staff in most cases. And of course, their function is to maximize value for shareholders, not to benefit their workers or society or the environment. And this clearly is not resilient. It's time to change. Even Davos, even the business leaders who are supposed to be leading the free world gathering in Davos agree with that. Companies need to create value for all their stakeholders. And a key part of doing that is including stakeholders in governance. So they cover different aspects because the stakeholders that we're looking to include may be employees of a business. They may be the community where the business operates, or they may be its customers. And there are different types of stakeholders as well. But we're fortunate to have presenters with examples of each of those things, including employees, including the community where a business operates, and including its customers. I'd like to start in a second by handing over to Stuart Voaden, who's a former director of timber construction specialist Carpenter Oak. And I don't think I'll do any more than say that. So if you're there, Stuart, can I hand over to you, please?
So Carpenter Oak has been going 30 plus years, which is quite some achievement in various iterations. At its peak, 80 staff over 4 locations. I've been with the company 20 years as a carpenter, as a manager, and then 10 years as a director, which I stood down from about 2 years ago, and have been involved with the business ever since as a freelance sort of consultant-wise counsel, hopefully wise. Up to this sort of lockdown period, I've been sort of very busy with the new leadership team, new operations team. So we're here to talk about governance, and my context is in the context of business. And we're a business in obviously in a free market economy, which is all about competition. We compete with other framing companies, timber building companies, which you're either you're one up or you're one down. So it is a business. It's a business that feels like a family. The Carpenter Oak tribe, which has always throughout its time felt like one actually is very inclusive. People feel like they belong, that they're involved and consulted. It's always been that way. And that just comes from the values of the original founders. Now, those original founders are still very much involved in the business. So they're shareholders, they're directors, and they also have operational roles, technical roles of design or project management, sales or production. So fully involved with the business, in the canteen at break times with all the staff, all the carpenters, sales, marketing, admin staff. So definitely in part of the family. So we've always had this degree of involvement. And the company barreled along very nicely in a kind of quite an organic, adaptive way with huge amount of trust with those that were in charge, those initial founders. But as the company grew and evolved quite naturally, it started to become it became a proper business, quite a serious business. And those youngsters that we joined as youngsters, then we started getting married and buying houses and starting families. The stakes started to get quite high of the survival of the business and its continued prosperity. And so with 80 people over 4 locations, we started to have to take governance quite seriously. And it took a while actually to realize what governance meant. So Carpenter Oak it's a bit of a love story. It has a love for craft. It has a love for good design. The use of natural materials is very much driven by purpose. And so it sort of naturally does what it loves. And everyone gets on brilliantly together doing that work. So directors' meetings tend to usually just be about operational stuff. At best, we might get into strategy, but usually it's about operational, getting stuff done, getting stuff built, getting stuff organized. But as the company grew and became a more serious enterprise, we did have to start to consult with other people in particular about a succession plan. So the company going back 30 years, so what did the company look like beyond the original founders? And that was quite a big, serious question to tackle. And most SMEs and most family businesses can come quite unstuck with this thorny question. So I would say the success of the business being that there was always this value of inclusion and consultation, but we did have to start to take serious advice from people outside of the business to guide us through this question of succession, of which employee ownership was an important part of that, the vehicle. So governance, we've learned to realize, was about, we were all doing everything all over the place, and there was a lack of coherence. So a big inquiry about who decides, and who was holding the power, and how was the power network throughout the organisation, who were the movers and shakers, and actually what was going on beyond the traditional organogram. So governance for us, we start to ask the following questions. I may look at our list here. So what decisions are needed? Who will make the decisions? How will we decide? What processes will we follow? What policies will guide our work together? And how can we change the answers? And then the output for these governance questions was to clarify all decision-making forums and create any new necessary sub-forums, define the remit and limit authority of all forums, define reporting processes, frequency and quality standards, establish meeting discipline and way of interacting in meetings, the team rules, the creation of new roles, establish clear accountabilities and assign any new accountabilities to existing roles, establishing new policies or changes to existing policies, and defining ways of working. Now for us to have that kind of more structured way of having governance meetings, and even recognizing even we're in a directors meeting, or are we actually having a governance meeting, or are we having a strategic meeting, or are we having an operational meeting? And quite difficult to kind of guide back to the governance meetings of who decides, and have we got the right people in the room? Have we got all the information we needed? Are we able to take the maximum amount of perspectives that are required? So it was quite hard work, and it took quite a long time. We did get there. It's work that keeps going. We did manage a succession project. As I say, we have an all new leadership team who are relatively quite young, but they do have the original founders available for guidance and wise counsel. I don't know how I'm doing on time, Andrew. I'm probably getting close.
Good question, actually. I was just looking at a nice way to interrupt and say we're coming to the end. So
well, I'll leave it there, but I'm really interested about what the questions are and the breakout group. So hopefully that helps get the ball rolling.
It certainly did. Thank you very much, Stuart. That was fantastic, and I found it really interesting to how much of so the fact that you used the word love, it came up yesterday, and someone was saying that one of the things that we can bring to this, to resilience, is support for each other and love for what we're doing and love for each other. So it was fantastic to hear you say that. I'd like to move on now to Les Bright, who's going to tell us about a business where ultimate control is exercised by the community. Over to you, Les.
Thanks, Andrew. Bit worrying to suggest that the community controls us, but yet a very specific community, the community of members. We are a 10-year-old community benefit society called Exeter Local Food, and we trade as the real food store in Exeter. We run a shop that offers food. Used to have a cafe as well and offer drink to have with that food, but that's one of the bumps along the road over the 10 years we've been in existence. So we're a 10-year-old. We're not a 2-year-old going through tantrums, and we're not a teenager that's difficult to manage. We're a 10-year-old, and maybe that's one of those boring times. And I was sort of reflecting on what I wanted to tell you about how we manage ourselves. And I decided that there were 3 fairly unoriginal kind of stages to life. There was getting started, keeping going, and having a future. They're really unusual and interesting labels I've given you there, and I hope you've all written those down. But getting started 10 years back was about a group of people coming together and saying, what's the best shape of organisation we can use in order to create a business that needs quite a lot of money in order to secure premises and to get equipment and have starting stock. And a community benefit society suited our needs, and people could join the society by making a contribution that would be anything from £100, which I think we now consider to be too high a starting point, through to £20,000. But regardless of how much you put in, your voice was heard to the same amount, to the same degree. Everybody has a vote in the business, but actually, for most purposes, voting is kind of not called upon, because what they do is vote to elect a board of directors who get on and essentially run the business and keep on reporting back. So in that early stage, the Community Benefit Society raised a lot of money. Actually, by far and away, the largest group of the 300 original investors, about 180 of them, just put that £100 in, because they believed in what we were about, but they weren't wealthy people. They certainly wouldn't generally have dreamed of owning a business, but they do. They did then, they still do now. Maybe they won't get their £100 back, but that's another debate altogether. And a year after the CBS was created, the store opened its doors. And I suppose I would say that we've obviously managed the business pretty successfully if we've run a retail business over the last 9 years, and indeed right up until today, 9 years of activity. But there have been bumps along the road, and I think that the bumps are around the differences between people signing up to be part of some exciting new beginning, to pioneer making something happen differently, and in our case to run a food store that was going to be about, you know, putting Devon's harvest out there on offer to local people, to offer local, fresh, seasonal food, to play a part in developing the local food economy. And there's something very exciting about that. And the level of involvement, the level of attendance at meetings was significantly higher then than I think we've grown used to over the last few years. We appointed a group of staff, and originally we actually had a kind of classic hierarchy of a general manager, a deputy, and the poor bloody infantry. But over time and under pressure from the group of staff who work for us, we've devised a flat structure. So all our group of staff, none of whom works full time, are co-managers of the business now. They work together making the important operational decisions about what we sell and how we sell it, alongside of the board who are working with them on developing things like our food policy, about what do we actually stock. And as we've grown, there have been challenges about being a good employer, staying ahead of the pack in terms of paying more than just the minimum wage, running a cafe in difficult times and still being a good employer, because so many cafes run on the basis of people with very insecure jobs, poorly paid. We've ended up bringing our cafe to an end, the one that we ran in the central library in the city, because it was impossible to carry on being a good, ethical employer and actually stay the right side of bankruptcy, frankly. You know, we just weren't making enough money from that cafe offering. But that's allowed us to focus back on our principal activity, which is running the food store, and thinking about running a food store that's different, that actually has something to say. It's a food store with attitude. But all the while, we've been saying to ourselves, well, you know, the energy that was around at the beginning, that was about the excitement of being associated with pioneering, has fallen away. And we've been thinking, what do we do about this? We don't actually need money now from people. What we need is new energy. And so we were on the point of launching a new membership scheme that was going to invite people to become part of our membership for just a tenner, once off, just to become a member, so that people could start to contribute that new energy. There'd be a new generation of drivers to the business. And then along came the pandemic. Now, I could pause at that point, but I just wanted to say that when we made the decision to close on lockdown day and to remain closed for a number of weeks, we took that opportunity to really review the business top to bottom, and above all, to actually ask our members, what do they want to tell us about what we've been doing well and what we've been doing badly, what we could improve upon, how we could do it, and to have no limits to their suggestions, from small things such as, why don't you let dogs in the shop, big to the person who got the dog and wanted to bring it in, incidentally, through to, what are you going to do about actually rebuilding a community feeling that you had when you had a shop and a cafe together. So we've actually been confronted with the having a future at the time when the rest of the nation has been worrying about their futures. But we've gained something from it, have absorbed a huge number of ideas, and we've been able to demonstrate to our members that we've listened to what they've told us and acted on it, and now have a kind of priority list of things to do to make things different in our new future. I think that's probably my 5 minutes up, isn't it?
I think it was, again, absolutely perfect timing. We coincided. The moment I was going to interrupt you was the moment you stopped. So thank you very much. That was fantastic, Les. So I'm actually going to move fairly rapidly without much to say to Erica Lewis now for our last presentation. Erica is the Director of Transition Homes Community Land Trust, which is focused on affordable community-led housing. Over to you, Erica.
Thank you. I'm one of 7 directors and trustees of Transition Homes Community Land Trust. We're based in Totnes. We've been around for more than 10 years, but we're still working to develop community managed, affordable and ecologically sound housing for local people in housing need. Our name, Transition Homes, reflects the fact that we evolved out of Transition Town Totnes to showcase how one of the ways in which we could transition to a low carbon future. Community land trusts are defined in housing legislation as community controlled, not-for-profit companies that own land and assets in perpetuity for the benefit of a defined local area. And CLTs can have a range of legal structures. Transition Homes is now both a company limited by guarantee and a registered charity, which is why we're all both directors and trustees. Today, we might choose to be a charitable incorporated company or something else, but that option didn't exist 9 years ago when we first became a legal entity. And the 7 directors are elected by the CLT members. So where are we up to? We now own a site in Dartington Parish and have planning consents and builders and most of the funding to start building 37 highly insulated low carbon homes running on solar power with land for food growing, a shared laundry and a meeting space, which we hope will help foster neighbourliness and mutual support amongst the people living there. We've had a huge number of challenges along the way, as you might be able to tell from the timescales. But when we did finally submit our planning application, we had so much community buy-in that 80 people wrote letters of support and the planning authority agreed it on the nod without even bothering to go to planning committee. So how did we get that level of community engagement? Well, I think it boils down to about 3 things. First of all, we actively seek, listen to and respond to the community's views at every stage. Secondly, we're transparent with everyone about what we're doing, what's going wrong, what the challenges are and why. And finally, we do have an explicit set of values that form the bedrock for everything that we do. So over the 10 years that this scheme has been in development, I think we must have had more than a dozen public consultation events of one sort or another. We put up plans and posters on the walls with all the information. All the directors are on hand to listen, answer questions and get feedback. We've had meetings to discuss with potential residents and the local community some of the policies that will apply, for example, who's going to be eligible to live there. And we've also consulted on some of the detail of what to include in the scheme via online surveys. And what's important, I think, is that we let people know the upshot, you know, what's been decided and why, through our newsletter, our website, and the parish magazine, which goes into every household. So even when we haven't been able to do what someone wanted, they know that they've been heard and they've had an explanation. Everyone locally is encouraged to join the CLT so that they're eligible to vote in the directors and of course to stand to be a director themselves. We have faced some very difficult decisions along the way. What we're trying to do has turned out not to be easy. At the moment, we face a viability issue because the high infrastructure costs and because our income is limited, as most of the homes that we're developing are going to be affordable. So with very heavy hearts, we have had to suggest some cuts, including losing some of the sustainability aspects, such as building with straw bales. Earlier this year, before lockdown, we asked the community what they felt about what we were proposing. And the broad consensus, despite a bit of argy-bargy, was that it was the most important thing was that we continue to maximise the number of affordable houses and to provide high insulation. However we did that, if we couldn't use straw, use something else, to keep the energy costs low, and then to make it as environmentally sustainable in other ways as we could possibly afford. So in other words, the proposal not to cut the number of affordable houses was the right decision to take, and the opposite of what most other developers would do. So the position we're now in is that despite those savings, the numbers still don't quite stack up. And so we are going to have to go back to the planners, or we have gone back to the planners, with a view to adding a few extra open market houses. Fortunately, we've got the space to do that. And we now await consent for those, which has obviously all been a bit held up with what's going on. So what we see as distinguishing the governance of our organisation as a community land trust is the level of community ownership and control. And the benefits of that are not just addressing local priorities in the way that people want to see them addressed. It's about the impact on people of feeling more trusted and empowered and inspired. People often dismiss those who don't want to see local development as NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And what we think CLTs do is help people feel proud to be SWIMBYs, something wonderful in my backyard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic, Erica. Really interesting sessions, I'm sure we all agree. What I found particularly interesting in these was that although I thought that they were going to be focusing on the first one very much on a workers' co-op, and the second one very much on what I described as community ownership, and the third using the same model of community ownership. What came out was with different points. Out of Stuart's presentation, one of the key points was how useful the involvement of all people involved in it was, and a social enterprise structure was, to helping with succession planning. From Les's presentation on the real food in Exeter, one of the interesting things there was that it's a model which is designed for the shareholders to have control, but actually they've succeeded in giving a significant level of control and co-management to employees, which is brilliant. And in Erica's case, again, the structure says that it's those who are actually involved with the business as shareholders or whatever who have the authority, but all the way through what Erica was saying was how much they'd involve the local community generally in decision making. So absolutely fascinating, I'm learning a lot here.